I work as a medical records clerk at St. Anthony's Hospital on the outskirts of Portland, in a sprawling complex that was built in the 60s and keeps getting additions tacked on like architectural afterthoughts. It was mid-October, and we were transitioning to a new digital system. I'd been assigned the overnight shift to scan old patient records without disrupting the day staff. This particular Tuesday night was my 5th consecutive overnight, and the exhaustion was starting to blur the edges of everything. I needed to retrieve a batch of charts from the basement storage area. We kept everything from before 1995 down there, organized in rows of shelves that seemed to go on forever under the dim emergency lighting. The storage area was accessible through the old service elevator at the back of the building, past the cafeteria and the morgue entrance. As I walked down the corridor, I noticed how my footsteps echoed off the cinder block walls, each sound seeming to multiply in the emptiness. I reached the elevator and pressed the button. The machinery groaned as it climbed up from below, that mechanical wheezing sound that old elevators make when they're struggling. I found a section I needed and started pulling charts from the shelves. The basement was so quiet I could hear the building settling around me, pipes creaking behind the walls. That's when I heard the elevator doors open. The mechanical ding echoed through the storage area. I could hear the doors slide apart, pause, then close again. Nobody got out. I figured it was just someone pressing the button upstairs by mistake, so I kept working. The elevator descended back down. I heard it stop at the basement level again. The doors opened. This time, I waited, listening. Still nobody stepped out. The doors stayed open for their programmed interval, then closed. "Hello?" I called out. No response. I walked toward the elevator area and looked out into the landing. Empty. The indicator light showed the elevator was heading back up to the first floor. A little unnerved, I returned to the shelves and quickly started loading charts into my cart. I just wanted to get back upstairs. As I was finishing, I noticed something odd. There was a section of shelving in the far corner that was separated from the others by a chain-link partition, the kind they use in storage facilities. A padlock hung from the gate, but it was open. Curiosity got the better of me. I pushed the gate open and walked inside. The charts here were different, older. The paper was brittle and discolored. I pulled one out at random and opened it. It was a patient file, but something was wrong with it. The admission date was listed as December 2, 1967. The patient photo showed a man with hollow eyes, his expression blank, almost absent. I flipped through a few more files, all from the late 1960s, all marked with a red stamp that said Ward C, discontinued. One file caught my eye because the patient's name had been redacted entirely, just black marker obscuring every instance. I opened it and started reading. It detailed a patient who had been admitted to Ward C, which according to the notes was a psychiatric unit. The patient had become increasingly agitated, claiming that something was following him through the building. According to the final entry, dated December 15, 1967, the patient had been found dead in his room. Cause of death? Cardiac arrest. The attending physician's note at the bottom said, "Patient expired at 3:47 a.m." Of note, patient's room was secured from the inside. Window remained locked. However, muddy footprints were discovered leading from the hallway into the room, stopping at the foot of the patient's bed. No source identified. I felt my pulse quicken. I closed the file and went to put it back on the shelf, but my hands were trembling so badly I dropped it. Papers scattered across the concrete floor. As I bent down to gather them, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were wet footprints on the floor leading from the back of the partitioned area. They led directly to where I was crouched, and they continued past me toward the elevator. I could smell it now, something damp and earthy, like soil after rain. I didn't look up. I left the papers on the floor, stood slowly, and walked toward the elevator with measured steps, keeping my eyes forward. I made it to the landing. I pressed the call button. Nothing happened. Behind me, I heard a sound like wet fabric dragging across concrete. I pressed the button again, over and over. The elevator finally groaned to life. I could hear it descending from somewhere far above. The dragging sound got closer. The elevator was taking too long. I turned toward the emergency stairwell 20 feet away. As I did, I saw it. A figure stood in the shadows near the partitioned area. Too tall, too thin, its head tilted at an angle that wasn't quite right. It took a step forward, into the dim light. I ran for the stairs. I took them two at a time, my breath ragged in my throat. I didn't stop until I burst through the door on the first floor, right next to the morgue entrance. The hallway was empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath, telling myself I'd imagined it, that exhaustion and shadows had played tricks on my mind. That's when I saw the wet footprints on the linoleum. They came from the stairwell door. They led down the hallway, away from me, around the corner toward the main hospital. I left through the emergency exit. I didn't even go back to the records office to grab my things. I called my supervisor from my car and quit. No explanation. She was annoyed, said it was unprofessional, but I didn't care. I never went back to St. Anthony's. I found out later that Ward C had been shut down in 1968 after a series of incidents that were never fully explained. The ward was sealed off, and that entire wing of the hospital was eventually demolished in 1972. What I did find, buried in an old newspaper archive, was a brief article from December 1967 about a patient death at St. Anthony's that was under investigation. The article mentioned the patient had been in Ward C, in the psychiatric unit, and that strange, muddy footprints had been found throughout the ward that night, footprints that didn't match any staff or patient on duty. They never determined where the mud came from. The basement where I'd been working was built directly over where Ward C used to be.